functioning to invoke this, and that functions to invoke this at the bigger level. So, you know, you could almost imagine this coming in a letter which talked about businesses in Brasilia, where you might think, okay, so in the end, what this letter is telling us is how good Brasilia is for businesses. So, at the outer level, appreciation of the city. By invoking judgment of a company, by inscribing appreciation of their products. And you could go on outwards sometimes. Certainly up to 3 levels is quite clear. You have to decide, where am I going? What do I want to focus on? And more importantly, what am I going to count? If I'm doing corpus-based work, and I want to end up with a nice table of so many cases of appreciation, so many cases, what do I count? Don't ask me. As I say, it really, you have to decide, you have to spell it out to your reader, and you have to do it. Okay, have I scared you with this? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay, good, fine. That's a good point to leave with you nice and scared. Go and have some coffee and get this back. World to this particular film. But the focus, of course, is on the particular film. Being familiar is kind of done in passing. Where evaluation comes may be important. It can be predictive, it is familiar, but it can often be buried in a sense, not buried, but put in as part of the nominal group, not the focus, but it's still doing important work. Okay, what do we get next? Yeah, coming of age drama. I'll stop there. Okay, unassuming but sweetly engaging. Ah, is it negative, unassuming? Actually, it's a positive word. Although, but sweetly engaging. So, unassuming means it's not making big claims. Well, I think it's actually faintly positive in English. Unassuming, you don't, what it means is it's not making big claims, so it's small scale, but if you don't like it, you don't use the word unassuming. You'd again have to go into a corpus and check this, but unassuming is actually a very British term of praise. You know, not making big claims for itself. In Britain we like, gentlemen, to be very close and quiet. So positive-ish, but of course, but suggests there is a switch. But I think it's a switch not from negative to positive, but from low praise to high praise. Okay? There's certainly a switch there. Yeah. Sweetly engaging. Okay, what are these? Unassuming and engaging. Sweetly, we could just say, is part of engaging. What category? Unassuming is actually different, because there isn't a verb, it assumes things. There is a verb, it engages things. So unassuming, although it's ing, is actually a different category. Sorry, not reaction, it's impact. Yeah. The first one, engaging. Unassuming, I think, probably evaluation, I'm not sure myself. But yes, I think also these are terms, if you look in a corpus, they are more likely to be people. So this is judgment lexis. And of course, drama is a human artifact of creation. Yes. Okay, that serves as Brazil's content. So far, we're mostly getting focused appreciation focused on the film. You might expect. Well, that serves as Brazil's contender for forthcoming best foreign language film Oscar. In other words, it will be Brazil's content. The film that Brazil will send for the Oscars. Now, why are we told that? I think there are two possible reasons. One is just here's some extra information, non-evaluative. The other is, okay, so this means someone thinks it's a good film. I think it could be read either way. If you say it's going to be Brazil's contender for this prize, that could be read to make you think, oh, that's good. Or it could just be, well, it's another bit, it's a fact about the film. I checked when I read this. I thought, actually, I read this just as a fact, as non-evaluative. Just here's something extra about the film. But it could be that some readers would read it as, oh, okay, so this means it's a good film. I think the language doesn't actually tell us. It could either be invoking appreciation or it could just be neutral. Neutral. That's how I read it. Well, the best foreign language film, Oscar, that's simply the category. It's not saying this is the best film. It's saying this is a category. This will be given to whatever is the best film. But we don't know which is the best film yet. Tussle, it just means contest. But we're not. I don't think we're being invited to evaluate it anyway.
Or it could also mean that Brazil has something good.
Could be, yes. Yeah. But as I say, I certainly read it just as neutral, here's a bit more information. When you haven't got explicit evaluation, it comes back to the reader, what they make of it. Sometimes it's very clear that the writer is pushing you in a direction. Sometimes I don't know why the writer is pushing you. Maybe just, here's a fact, or, gosh, this tells you it's good quality. I don't think there's any way of asking the reader, the writer. Okay. Set in Sao Paulo. Yeah. Certainly it might mean something in Brazil, but this is written for a British audience. Oh, it doesn't make any difference there. Just a fact. Adapted from writing director short, I don't want to go back to those. Yeah, just facts. It gently explores teenage friendship in ways challenged by the arrival of a provocative outsider. Yeah, good. Gently is clearly the key word there. What else? What other evaluatives? Challenge, yeah. Provocative is the other very clear example. The provocative outsider. See? What's the difference between gently and provocative in this text? It is, yeah, you can argue that there's, but one other thing of it, who is it aimed at? So a provocative outsider
It's judgment.
It's judgment, very clearly. Am I the writer negotiating that with the reader? Yeah. It's within the story. Okay? In other words, he's not saying this actor or this person is provocative, is that bad. But within the story, maybe bad to the other characters, but it's kind of, this partly comes back to the question of literary and artistic texts. It's within the story. So it's not, I negotiated this with you, but I'm simply saying it is still evaluative.
But this is telling the story, right? So this
Yes.
is factor, facts,
Yes, but it's evaluative facts, but evaluation within the frame of the story. Why would you do that? You could argue, well, this is maybe, again, increasing interest, making you feel the drama, but basically, you're not meant to think, oh, that outsider is really bad. It's not negotiating. On the other hand, gently, that is what's being evaluated there. The film itself as an artifact. Again, interestingly, gentle is normally judgment, but it's the film that does it gently. So it's positive evaluation, positive appreciation of the film, evaluation, but provocative, which in a sense is more obvious as evaluation, is inside the frame of the story. You see, that's really important. Leonardo is a blind teenager protected by his parents. Bullied by his classmates. Bullied is provoking. It's something bad that people are doing. What are we meant to feel? How are we meant to react? It's not a good thing. Okay, so you could argue that there is invoked, provoked judgment of the classmates, because they are the bullies. Some people would argue there is perhaps invoked judgment of Leonardo, and that's unfortunate. And that's where this problem of, being unfortunate means I feel good about him, even though it's a negative thing. Bullying, I feel bad about them, and it is a bad thing. So we've got this, that's where this distinction, this possible distinction that hasn't been worked out yet. But I'm not sure even if I would want to go that far. And this is in the story. Are we actually, I suppose we're meant to think, well, bullying is bad, therefore the classmates are bad, but they're not real people. So I kind of meant to think, yes, within the story, this is the kind of, what's the word, the reaction, not interaction, the mechanism of the story, the way the story works. So I'm not actually meant to think, wow, these are bad people, because they're not real people. This is where this thing of some readers, some viewers will come away thinking they are bad. Some people watching television or films do not make a distinction between what's happening there and real life. But then it is real life. On the whole, within our culture, that is not valued, that kind of reaction is not valued as you go up the education ladder. And for people like us, for us, that we say, oh, that's how the ordinary people react. They think the telenovela, the soap operas are real. We know it is. We stand back and we see it as an artifact. I'm not saying who's right, but there is that distinction. Okay. Comforted by the support of Giovanna. Comfort. Affect, but of a character, not of me. By the support of Giovanna. So, again, perhaps we're meant to feel, at some level, to understand Giovanna is a goodie. And we feel okay about him. But all of this, I think, I regard is within the frame of the story. They both yearn for a first kiss. Yearn is yearning. Affect. Their affect. But within the story, how do we feel about them? They yearn for a first kiss. So I think we say, well, what it means is we feel a bit sorry for them. Because, you know, they want something that they haven't yet had. And we know that they are, we've already had it set up, they are the good characters. Okay? Because he's blind, he's bullied and comforted. And Tess, Giovanna, comforts him. So we've already got good and bad characters in the film. The good characters are yearning for something they haven't got. So they feel affect, but why are we told this? So that within the frame of the story, we feel, instead we've got to be sorry for them. A little more excitement when Gabrielle joins class. The two boys become inseparable, pushing a jealous Giovanna to the sideline. Jealous, yes, which is negative. But now she's negative, and she's also pushed to the sidelines. So, yeah. But that could be bad. Typically, being pushed to the sidelines means someone central isn't getting the attention. So, again, within the story, there's quite a complex play of good and bad, positive and negative going on. But, again, we have to think, well, is this something we should be reacting to, or are we simply being told this in order to understand why the reviewer thinks this is a good or bad film? Okay? And one of the things that you get with reviews is this, what I think is the onion layering. In the middle, you've got the story, and there's evaluation, emotion going on there. But we're not actually meant, as educated viewers and readers of this, we're not meant to think, oh, that's bad, that's good, I hate those people. But simply, oh, that's interesting. These people are behaving in this way. It kind of attracts them, it makes me feel something. But basically, at the end, I'm going to stand back and say whether I like the film. Gabriel opens up the world to Leonardo. He takes him to the cinema, whispering comforting here to bring the next alive.
Opens up the world.
Yeah, good or bad? Good. He's doing something good. Invoked, not inscribed. He's doing something which we know is in principle good.
Whispering.
Whispering? No, I think that's simply It's just describing, to say, there may be other people. I guess actually he takes it to the cinema, so he's not going to shout at the cinema, because otherwise the other people get upset. As the friendship deepens, Leonardo is encouraged to test the boundaries of his independence. So, again, there's something good going on there, but notice it's all part of the retelling of the story. Then we're going to switch. A sincere, well-intentioned drama. Okay. And although you can't see it very clearly, that is actually paragraph end. It doesn't show it very clearly in the layout. Which tells us what's going on. What's this paragraph doing as a whole? Narrating the film. So we get things going on, we get the evaluation, but it's even physically within the paragraph. It's about that. Then, a sincere, well-intentioned drama. Now we're back to the film. What do you notice about sincere and well-intentioned?
Appreciation.
Good. What kind of lexis? Sincere. People are sincere. So again, like the unassuming but sweetly engaging in this film, in this review, and we may find it in many others. Once we raise it here, we might start looking for it in other film reviews. We've got this human product is appreciated using judgment lexis. The way that it's maybe a little too determined to ensure that everything turns out for the best. What's the key word there? One. Two. Okay. Two typically provokes, signals there's some evaluation going on. And two is normally negative. The two normally signals something negative around. In itself it's not negative, but it's possible, you know, some people say, well, it's just too good. But that's playing, in fact, normally two means over the norm and bad. So it's too determined to, determined, again, it's something that people are. People are determined. There are reservations about what exactly Gabriel might see in Leonardo. What's the key word there? Reservations. Interestingly, over-evaluation to the story than to the film. The story is, yes, it's telling us it's a good film, but it's doing it by telling us how interesting, emotional the story is. And it's bringing us into that, bringing it close to us. I don't think this would certainly never get into a newspaper in Britain. It's just not how we do it. Now, as I said, I don't know, it may just be an accident, this one, so we need a corpus to compare. But it gives you the kind of lines of inquiry that if you were looking at Portuguese versus English film reviews, you might want to follow up some of these things, because this happens a lot in other Portuguese, like differences between Portuguese and Brazilian. And so on. And then that no, it's not that there. Okay, let's apply it to us. But what are we applying to us the problem in the film, the story of the film. So, does the story in the film have a moral for us? For me, this feels like 19th century text. Or, and I'm thinking now as coming from British, or adolescent. Now, it may be that it's not. Maybe this is, I don't know anything about this writer. So again, there may be signs of a big cultural difference going on. And then I recommend to anybody, and notice the soundtrack. Sonora happened, good bet to win, and so on. So we do step back and say, yes, it's a good film. And it started that way. So it's sandwiched right at the beginning and right at the end, yes, it's a good film. So you could argue, yes, this is like English. The outside layer of the onion is appreciation of film. That outside layer is much thinner than in the British one, the English. There, the appreciation of film takes up more space and gives more focus. And the other thing is we get more of this, let's think about what the story of the film means for us. We get one little sentence at the end in the English. So what people evaluate, what they try to value, and how they go about it, and how simultaneously, how they involve the reader or distance themselves and say, I'm just here coolly evaluating, or I'm engaged and you should be engaged too. Those are two, the reason I pick them, although is they are so different in how they do it. So there's plenty to do there. What I haven't tried to do is to go through, as you might have to do if you were doing it for your own research, line by line, and say this is this, and this is this kind. I've tried to get a bigger picture. Of course you have to do the detail, but that's where the problem is. So certainly that difference of attitude, of way of evaluating the same entity, I think probably reflects a cultural difference. It may be an accident, so that's where corpus work comes in. If you find on each side more of the distance of British corpus and more of the engaged and story focus and moral presence in the Portuguese, then you can start saying, okay, so this does seem to be something that is more typical of the culture. But, you know, I was hoping, I thought this was Brazilian, so I was hoping you could fill me in on the culture from the Brazilian, but never mind, you'll have to go out and do the research with different corpora. Okay, any questions about that? Yeah, and it then raises interesting questions about education. What happens? You know, I said in Australia it's been shown that the rather distanced appreciation of a work of art is what's valued. I think though in Portugal, even in Brazil, is the moral aspect still strongly valued. If you're writing at school about a novel or a film, is it still valued to make the kind of, you know, the last two sentences of that? If that was written in an English essay at school, I suspect the teacher would write something like, this is a bit tenuous, or this is a bit too personal, or, you know, keep cool. Now it could be that in Brazil, in Portugal, that would be valued. Okay? But certainly, as I say, I'm interested in these partly from the point of view of education progression. I have been able to show it here, because the more to do with literature reviews, book reviews in Australia, and in Britain to some extent, there does seem to be this progression in coming from affect to judgment to appreciation. And maybe that in the judgment is kept to be more important. There's less value placed on standing back, which would probably then relate to much broader issues of culture. Say that in West British culture, we do value the ability to stand back from phenomena, if you like, in scientific styles. Now, I suspect that, maybe, this is really being tendentious, in strongly religious countries, maybe there's more of a value kept on moral. Britain is a strongly a-religious country. I mean, there are religious people, but basically the culture is not religious. For us, morality is something to be embarrassed about. And that may be, certainly in Portugal, I think, religion is still a very strong cultural thing. More than in Brazil, yes, yeah.
Huge considerations of I would like to bring in, the point that this text might be written for, public, audience, very narrow audience, for which the film might be done, like adolescents or
Absolutely, yeah.
Or just to, bring more affinity or,
Yes, absolutely.
So it's a kind of more like paying for the speech, like a emotional speech, but because the film was done in the first place for involving more in
Yes.
Empathy,
Empathy, yes.
Something like that. So, if this review would be written for film critics or less, would be totally different. So, we should consider
Absolutely.
the
audience.
finality of
Yes.
the purpose.
The purpose, yes.
For writing the review.
Yeah. That's why I say I'm basing this on 2 reviews. Thinking, well, they seem to, but you're right. I don't know enough Portuguese to know about the website where I found it.
Yeah.
I know that the English one is a general. It's not one that has it's not grinding a particular religious or sexual acts, as we say in English. It's for general consumption. But certainly if I went into, I can't remember what they're called. There's that whole group in America who believe that the rapture, that the world will end soon, and some people will be taken up to heaven, and others will be burned. If you read a website for that, yes, you would expect. Now, the Portuguese may be more specific. That's why you would need a bigger corpus. As I said, what I said then was very tendentious. I would never try to write that without more evidence. But it's the kind of, just showing the kind of interpretation that you might be able to make precisely with your conditions on that.
If you get a court, which will be for the same audience and for the same media, perhaps we take out the bias,
Exactly.
of that.
You reduce the intervening variables.
Yeah, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. That's what time are we supposed to finish? Well.
Yes.
No, that's good. Right. Okay. Thanks very much. This afternoon I will look at engagement, and if there's time we'll look at theme, which is completely different area, but it's up to you. If you want to keep going on the other parts, we finished now what I want to look at too briefly on attitude, we'll look at engagement, how attitudes are negotiated. But we have got time for theme. Sorry, if we have time, we'll also look at theme. But I'm in your hands. Okay. Have a good lunch. Basically, a lot of this draws on Bakhtin's insight that all language use is dialogic. You're always responding to what has been said by someone else, or expecting, framing what you say in the expectation that other people will react to it. And that's very clear with appraisal. The way you evaluate depends on what other people have done. Sometimes, in a sense, at the level of the culture. How you might go about evaluating, what you might evaluate, the values you use will partly depend on the culture. And what is culture for each individual? Culture is not genetically inherited. You find the culture, you are enculturated by language particularly, by other things, visuals, behaviour, etc., but especially by language, by what other people have said or written before that you then come across, you're exposed to. And when you are producing your language, you're both, as it were, looking back and saying, well, that person said that, and unconsciously I accept that, or I disagree, and thinking, what are my audience going to say? How are they going to react? I may need to negotiate. Now, monogloss basically means trying, pretending that dialogue doesn't exist. It does. All language is dialogue, unless we're talking to ourselves. And even then, we are our own audience. My mum wanders around, she lives on her own, she's 93. She wanders around talking to herself all day. But she is her own audience. And I think she's really practicing what she is going to say when one of us visits her. So even apparent non-audience oriented speech has an audience. So monogloss just presents the language as if there was no possibility of anything else. So if you just say, this is wonderful, you're evaluating, but it is monoglossic. There's nothing in your language which admits the possibility of anyone else having a different view. Of course, you may know they do, but you don't show it in your language. So, Twilight is the best film ever because it's a never-ending story of love. It's taken from our website. So that does not admit the possibility of alternative. On the other hand, heterogloss basically means, if you like, dialogic, means there's a possibility of another voice. Now, you may, as it were, think there is going to be another voice, there are other possible views, but I want to show that I want to close them down. So I accept that they're there, I admit they're there, but I don't want them, essentially. So it recognises dialogical alternatives, but acts to challenge or restrict them. Twilight is not the best film. I'll come back to this, but the negative is crucial, and in fact, these were all in the same website, where people, I think it was, Twilight is the best film ever because, finish this sentence. Okay, so, adolescent girls, I guess, mostly, would, do you know Twilight, the series? I didn't, but then I'm the wrong generation. They filled it in, and one of them was the first example. A few cases later, we have Twilight is not the best film, which is clearly dialoguing with the instruction. Twilight is the best film because So it's telling me to say why, and I'm then contradicting it. But by contradicting, by saying it's not, I am, the writer there is at some level admitting, well, I can't not admit it because it's above them on the page, in the web page, admitting that someone else has said the opposite. This can often be explicitly dialogic. Did you have the film Life of Brian here? Yeah. In that, there's a scene where a lot of people think that Brian is the Messiah. And they're all outside his house shouting, Messiah, he's the Messiah. And his mother, who's played by a man, his mother opens the window and shouts out, he's not the Messiah, he's a naughty boy. Where the not the Messiah is clearly actually responding to using the other person's words. But even when that doesn't exist, the negative implies, as I say, someone somewhere out there thinks the positive. Lord of the Rings totally beats Twilight, but all the way back into not being. That bit is actually monologic. Okay? So this is basically, if you didn't have the first bit, Twilight is not the best film, this would be the dialogue of the death, shouting at each other to say, no, this is best, not admitting the other person's view. Expand, then, makes allowance for dialogically alternative positions of voices. So, Twilight may appeal to a younger audience. That opens the possibility that some people might think, well, I'm not sure. Does it? I like Twilight and I'm not a younger audience or whatever. So the may opens the possibility of other voices. And you remember I said at the beginning, traditionally modality and evaluation have both been seen as personal. Mine not being sure. In fact, modality is interpersonal. It's to do with negotiation. Okay, so those are the three basic dialogues. Everybody okay with those? Do, as always, stop me and ask me questions or make any comments. Okay, so on the one hand, we have monogloss. Right, this is a great film. Of course, in one sense, that is projecting, as I said, it's an evaluation. I want a reaction. And of course, at some level, I know that other people may not agree. But that bit of language does not, as it were, show expectation of disagreement, or even agreement. I want to say yes, I like it too. But it doesn't actually show that this is part of a dialogue. Whereas as soon as you get, it could be argued though, that this is, see that who's going to argue? If we have a verbal process, then we have to think, well, who is the sayer of this verbal process? Could be intended to be me, the speaker, the writer, or it could be other people think this, but I don't. But it's allowing other voices in. To my mind restricts it and basically says, well, this is my view. It allows quite clearly the option someone else might have a different mind. Again, slight detail. One of the times you can use I or we, meaning we the authors, in academic writing is precisely when you know that what you're saying is not yet accepted by everybody else in the amongst the community.
When you say
we meaning the authors, or I, you know, very often you're told,
yes,
don't use I in academic writing.
Right.
Well, you can if it's I, the researcher, so I measured. So very often we use passive, or observation showed, so we nominalised. You can use I then sometimes. The other time when you can use I without your, as I said, raise the question with negation. Why is it here? It seems rather different from the others. Because, for example, partly as I'll say on Wednesday, modality uses projection. In some cases, but projection is used to express modality. It's likely that type of projection that is also modal. But negation does seem rather different. And of course, Halliday includes negation under interpersonal. Why? Well, broadly, if you think, why do you say what isn't? Well, first of all, let me ask, what proportion of clauses do you think are negative as opposed to positive? On the whole, if you had a huge corpus of the language, what kind of proportion of positive versus negative clauses would you expect? 70 to 30%? Which way? Which way?
70 positive.
More positive, 70 positive, 30.
5% negative.
5% negative, yeah? You're actually under. It's typically 9 to 1. If you go to a big enough 9 positive to 1 negative. So negative is the marked, and you also have to add something to make a negation. You put something more in the language. And then you think, well, why do people want to talk about what isn't? Essentially, the answer, a bit like modality, why do you say you're certain? Because you think someone isn't. Why do you say what isn't the case? Because you think that someone somewhere thinks it is, including yourself. So if I now look out and say, oh, it isn't raining. It isn't, hang on just a minute. It isn't raining. Why might I say that? Because this morning when I came in, it was pouring with rain. If I was in the middle of the Sahara, it would be very odd to look out of the tent and say, oh, it isn't raining. Because nobody expects it to rain in the Sahara. So there's nobody to contrast with. Sorry, yeah.
So you're saying that when you use a kind of a negative, we are opening to another possibility.
We are accepting the existence of another possibility and closing it. There's a difference between ignoring something and pretending it's not there and actually explicitly rejecting it. To reject, you have to, as it were, admit that it's there. So, that's why it is dialogic, but contracting. It doesn't open up, it closes it down.
If I oppose that in the affirmative totally monoglossic, because, for example, the other example that you gave,
this is a good film.
this is good film.
Yeah.
So
Then
that's it. It's
that's
good film.
monoglossic. There's nothing in the language which signals I am aware of the possibility of other views, other voices. I may well be, and you know, if I'm chatting with my friends, I probably expect them to go along with me, to agree, so I don't need to negotiate. Or if you're a politician, you may use it, monogloss, in order, as it were, not just to reject your opponent, but to pretend they're not there. You know, the way to improve Brazil's economy is X. I'm not going to say what it is. I don't want to keep a secret away. But that doesn't admit. But saying, you know, well, in fact, of course, politicians are unlike, but they might say the way to improve Brazil's economy is not to, meaning the other bloke down there has suggested this and I'm closing it out. But what I'm doing is admitting that there is this other man who has a different view, even if I'm saying no. So why do we talk about what isn't? Because the positive alternative, the term I use, no, I'm not saying certainly not now.
Good is not something for now.
The term I like to use is on the table, somehow existing. Do you know this expression, on the table? I mean, like a proposal is on the table, it's there to talk about.
There is a famous phrase in English sentence in Brazil. The book is on the table.
Yeah, I know.
Everybody knows.
Yes, this is different though. On the table means ready to be considered. So, sometimes it's explicit. This was for an advert for Benecol. You have it in Brazil as well? It's a kind of spread like butter, but it has statin, so it's good for cholesterol, for your blood. So, never mind. You've probably got it in a different name. Anyway, so this is an advert. What happens if I forget to eat Benecol for a couple of days? Will I reverse all the good work I've done? And that, so 1 or 2 days will not make a great difference. So there, the negation is of something that the other person, the speaker, the client, the customer, is supposed to have said. But then more, and this is more like, remember, invoked phrasal, it can often imply another position, another voice, without making it explicit. So, by the year 2001, you see this will be the standard, this product, for using weight. Why? Because only active stop means no strenuous dieting. Means that some of you who are reading this and who want to lose weight assume that in order to lose weight you must diet strenuously. And I'm ruling that out. So it projects onto the audience beliefs, assumptions about the world in order to negate them. So sometimes it's very clear who you're negating. Because they just said something, you can say no. Sometimes it's, you have to go out into the culture and think, right, what does this imply about people who are likely to read or hear this, what some of them might believe. And remember, this can include you yourself. As I say, when I say, oh, it's not raining, I would include myself as amongst the people who are, in some sense, expecting it to be raining. Okay. But it can be quite interesting then to look at what is assumed and who is assumed to believe it. If you're looking at teachers' dialogues, teachers' discourse, logs, for example, sometimes you get a good idea of what they think students are like or want to do by what they negate. This class doesn't X, meaning I've had other classes which do X, or my colleagues have had other classes who do X. So we have to think about whose beliefs about the possible or actual state of affairs is being negated. So negation is a fascinating area. A colleague of ours, now Leah, who was Brazilian actually, married myself, she did her PhD on Aurora Estrela, because that has more negation than 9 to 1, 1 to 9. It's more common, it's part of the theme of the novel that there's more negatives in it than there should be. And then you have to start thinking, what does that tell us about what the writer is trying, his spectre is trying to do? Why does she have certain negatives? Of course, the 9 to 1 is across the language as a whole. A big general corpus. If you go into individual texts or individual registers, you may well find that there's more English. I suspect you find quite a lot in classroom teachers say no. Or if you're like me, you say yes, and my students know that means no. So, but then on the whole, it will vary according to the register. Okay, let's have a look now. I don't want to spend too long on these, but let's have a look at some of the subcategories. I think the parts still being worked out, but they actually most of them seem to work better than the appraisal thing, where I think there are still real problems. There are problems here, but they often work quite well as these categories. Okay, so you can contract, you can disclaim, or proclaim. So you either, as it were, contradict, disclaim, or you state strongly with proclaim. Okay? So disclaim can be denied, this isn't a good film, or the counter. We saw this in the, particularly in the Portuguese review this morning. So you say something in order to counter it, in order to. So although it's a good film, what do you expect to follow from that? It's a good film.
Something
Yeah.
opposite, in opposition.
But if I get with the although, it's a good film.
I
No,
will enjoy it.
if I just say it's a good film because I like it, or I like it, yeah. The although signals yes, and it signals there's a but coming. Then of course in English we don't have although but. Although already does it. But we have a contrast, yeah. Although it's a good film, I don't like it. Although it's unassuming, it's sweetly appealing. So you set up one thing, whereas with not, you project an alternative view and wipe it out, reject it.
This isn't a good film for sure, or indeed.
Those are going to be in slightly different areas. Yeah, that's the trickiness of it. But although it's a good film, it's a good film, but I don't like it. Sets up, it doesn't entirely reject the first idea, which someone else must believe. You don't say, although, and then put in something that you think no one will ever believe. Okay? Unless, and sometimes my students do that, they would argue with the wrong people. They would argue about something that nobody in the field would accept. So they sort of rule out saying, although, I think, no, you don't need that because nobody, you're showing you have not read enough of people in the field, because if you had, you would recognise that nobody would ever think that. So although really means someone somewhere is going to think this. I'm not rejecting it entirely, but I'm giving you something much more important, something more true. So, but I don't like it. So you counter it, you don't deny or reject. And what you're countering is the expected consequence. So, it's a good film, so I like it. Although it's a good film, I don't like it. So, although is often put together with, in the category of cause. Because means it follows, although means what you expect to follow doesn't follow. Okay, so those are both in the sense pushing away the other person's view, the other possible person's view. Concur is, proclaim is basically trying to, accepting at some level that not everybody would agree, but trying to force them to agree. Rather than pushing away what they think, rejecting it, you proclaim what you think in a way which projects it as you can't possibly disagree. So obviously it's a good film. Of course it's a good film. Okay? These project, everybody's going to agree. But obviously, as it were, indicates, well, actually, I know something else. The fact is, it's a good film. If you Google the fact is, it's quite surprising how often you find that it's followed by something that you won't agree with. In other words, people tend to use the fact is when they're wrong. When they know that there's disagreement. And the more they realise there's disagreement, the more likely to say, well, the fact is, I had a lovely example. Do you know hair coursing? It's been banned in Britain now, but it was where, you know, hares like fast rabbits. What's a hare? A rabbit. But a hare, it's got longer legs. Yeah. They would set one free and then, after a few seconds, let a dog chase it and kill it. And it was a question which dog caught the hare fastest. So they banned it, and called hare coursing. And I've got a little text, I've got a year ago, where someone is arguing that, you know, hare coursing is good because if you don't have hare coursing, you will have to kill all the dogs. Well, exactly. But no, this kind of person wasn't open to that. But it was full of, it is an undoubted fact that everybody knows that. And you're thinking, this is someone who realises they're completely wrong, but they want to cover up, and including from themselves. So that's pronounce. Concur and pronounce are very close. I'm never sure myself. Concur, I suppose, typically means, as it were, projecting everybody's going to agree. Pronounce is, as it were, stressing this is right, this is correct. Endorse means using outside source, another source, to support your view. So the word approve, you can imagine viewed figures suggest, much, that's then opening, that's, yeah. One thing I usually told my students was never use the word prove. In applied linguistics, we can't prove anything. So they indicate, it's quite strong, they suggest, they imply, but not prove. Prove is just too strong in applied linguistics. Because it, again, it suggests there is no possibility of this being wrong.
In that verb totally, is there total English? Is a kind of complicated? Totally.
As a verb, no.
Totally.
Adverb, totally. Yes. Yeah,
It's a
I
kind of,
totally agree.
yes, conclude.
That's more going to be in,
Of course.
graduation in a different area, rather than in this. Totally, I'm trying to think of an instance where you could use it. Maybe. I tend to think of it as an agreement sign. So someone says something and the other person says totally. I totally agree. And I'm not sure, I'll have to think about that, whether I put it under, it's not concur, I don't think, could be. Could be, I think, yes. But it could also just be better handled as upgrading in maximising in graduation. So there's a couple of examples on deny, rejects, the implied or stated. counter replaces it with which might have been expected. Concur assumes, projects assumption that the other person will agree. Pronounce emphasises my position in a way which imposes agreement, makes it difficult for the other person to disagree, and endorse, I use someone else or something else to support the view I want to put forward. Everybody happy with those? Yeah, good. Okay, then subcategories of expansion. Three main ones. Sorry about all the details here, but I think they are useful. Expand, you can entertain or attribute, acknowledge or distance. Entertain is probably the biggest category. Entertain something like this is probably the best film I've seen. It leaves it open. It kind of offers an opinion, but accepts that there may be other views. Sometimes invites other people to support or not. Attribute, you acknowledge that there are other people's views. So you're bringing other people into it, other voices into your text, but it may not be clear what your opinion is. You're just bringing it in, as it were. There are other voices around this topic. Whereas distance, you bring other voices in and you